What up, Wizards? It's Deb from The Place, and today, since Bloomburrow preview season is over, and so is the full set review, thank Garfield, I finally get to do my favorite video of every season. It's time to look at sleepers. Now, the hype for Bloomburrow is about as high as it gets, so you might think it'd be tough to find sleepers for a set like this, but not really. I got more sleepers than there are meerkats in a manor. Does anybody remember that show? Anyway, I got like 13 total sleepers today, so let's go ahead and get to it.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. Like and subscribe. Douglas, Samantha, Judy, Steven, all yous, go ahead and subscribe. I'll give you a second. All right, I'm confident that you've done it. All right, let's get to some sleepers here. There are, like I said, 13 of them. That's kind of a lot. These cards get to sleep. I'm very jealous. I haven't gotten to do that in a while. Been poring over this set, trying to examine the cards that haven't been examined enough. And I think, again, that we've got a pretty good spread of them. So let me go ahead and start with the honorable mentions here. I've got 3 of them I want to show you today, and 2 of them I'm only half serious about, and the other one I'm 1.5 times serious about. So that's double serious if you do the math. I'm pretty sure it works out that way. Anyway, I do want to talk quickly about Tangle Tumbler over here, I think is the official name of the card. It had like 3 different translations during spoiler season. Is Tangle Tumbler what we ended up on? I guess that's fine. You know, my sister had a rock tumbler when I was a kid, and I always wanted to play with it, but my whole family was like, no, you can't play with the rock tumbler. You're too young. And it's like, how do you break a rock tumbler? And I still feel that way, like all these years later. You put rocks in it. Either way, why am I still so raw about that? There's a magic card to talk about. This card is probably fine. I think most people think that it's nothing. So the fact that it could be fine, that's the definition of a sleeper, I guess, in some ways. I just think it feels like sometimes nowadays we're in the era of standard magic where you might as well start the game with a token in play. It is assumed that you will have a couple of tokens over the course of most games of standard magic, almost no matter what deck you're playing with. So this dude seems kind of okay to me. The evanescence cost on him is really low. You know, if you want to wake him up inside and bring him to life, it's just a couple of tokens. You could do it at instant speed, so you block with him or whatever. I don't know. A 3-mana 6/6 seems okay to me, and there's extra gravy on top if you like the taste of gravy, but I don't know. Pugnacious Hammerskull didn't see a lot of play, so I don't know if this guy will. Either way, come on, man. 3-mana 6/6. But I also do like the Moose, man. What is it? Galewind Moose, I think is the name of this card. I think I probably got it right. But in case I didn't, I probably don't have to know what the entire name of the card is. I just say Moose and you know what I'm talking about. So that means this card might not quite be a sleeper. But I think in terms of what it's going to do in Limited, people have been talking about it because it's just like strictly better Colossal Dread Moose memes. But I think that it might actually have like some... maybe it can make some tracks in Standard too. And I know it sounds like super wild, but once you set the Moose loose, man, he's got like 4 different keyword abilities. The Flash is probably the most important one. We're losing Wandering Emperor. Don't you want to have a new Flash thing you can just slam during your opponent's combat step and ruin their entire life? And like the Moose could do that, but it costs an awful lot of mana. And I see that. So I'm not like too juiced about the Moose, but I just want to say he's got quite the caboose. I was just kind of looking for a bar there, but I don't think I quite got there. So I should move on to the actual honorable mention. The last couple were, again, just memes and all that. So I think that Starscape Cleric might be the real deal. Holyfield. I'm fully aware this looks like a dumb card too. I get that, but allow me to batter you up for just a second if you don't mind. This card has a few attributes that I'm pretty into. I've been talking about how it's kind of like a Sanguine Bond, like all previous season long, but in that, I have forgotten to point out, failed to do so actually, that it works just like Sanguine Bond does with like an Exquisite Blood on the table. So if you wanted a redundant effect with Bond or Veto or whatever to put into your commander deck to pop off with Exquisite Blood, then you've got yet another one of those, which, you know, when you add that to the already existing like buffet plate of steak and shrimp that was things you can do with this card, I think that we're starting to talk about a real thing, at least in Commander. But even when you confine the card to Standard and only Standard, there are plenty of ways to gain 1 or 2 life at a time in your deck that like aren't super embarrassing. So it's not unthinkable to believe this guy might deal, you know, 5, 6, 7 damage over the course of a game if he stays out. And once you have multiples, you're just unstoppable. It's a pretty evil looking card for the black-white life gain decks in Standard, and I think it might actually have a shot at life. So I really like this dude, and I kind of wanted him to be on the main list, but there's a bunch of what I think might be even better cards to get to. But I do just like really like this guy, and I made no secret of that, so I wanted to put a special spotlight on him here in case he never does anything, honestly. So he's a good dude, bad boy, but we got to move to number 10 here on the actual list, which, you know, It's always an extension of the honorable mentions. This time it's a card I don't have the utmost confidence in, but like the more you think about it, the more you think, well, this card has a lot it can actually do. So let's hop to it. That's the name of the card. I wasn't saying we should move on to the actual card and then give you the name. The name of the card is hop to it. This is 3 mana for 3 bunnies, which like doesn't seem super good. But first of all, back in my day, I hate saying it, but you know, Spectral Procession used to be a halfway decent Magic card. And I have to believe that it could potentially still be, especially in a format that's like kind of exactly set up for it right now. For one, we already know that like Regal Bunnycorn is a Magic card, and this gives Bunnycorn +3/+3 on your 3rd turn, which seems okay. Yeah, it seems fine. But it also works pretty well with Burrow Guard Mentor, another 2-drop that's actually in Bloomburrow. Benefits tremendously from this card. But go back to the past for a second here, for a card that you probably didn't remember existed, but Pollen Shield Hair, just while we're talking bunnies. Hop to it actually works really well with both halves of that card. So I guess Rabbits Matter could like potentially be a deck, but consider also Knight Errant of Eos, you know, like this will help Knight Errant get convoked into play really, really easily. And I know Gleeful Demolition costs 1/3 of what this card costs, but this doesn't require any artifacts and might be a decent, like, you know, copies 5 and 6 of a card like Gleeful Demolition, especially since we lose cards like Voldar and Epicure. Maybe we don't have as many artifacts floating around to sacrifice to Demolition. We have to resort to stuff like this, but that's fine. It's great with Knight Errant. It's great with Imadane's Recruiter too. So the Boros deck might, if it's desperate, fit a couple of copies of this thing, but there are other new decks that might actually want this too, like the Rottenmouth Viper deck. This is 3 permanents to sacrifice to a Rottenmouth Viper, meaning that you could easily drop it on the turn after you play this card. So again, that's just a few things that you can do with 3 bodies on 1 card for 3 mana, but there's plenty of more. Cards like this tend to be deceptively good, and I don't think this one's any different. You know what else tends to be really good without people quite realizing it at first is just cards that allow you to cast spells out of your graveyard, right? Like Torrential Gearhulk is a good example, and people were like, well, that card's 6 mana, it'll never see play, and it was one of the most important cards in Standard for like 2 years. So sometimes, yeah, being able to do that is really, really good. Now, obviously, one of the reasons that Gearhulk, Terry, had such a good run in Standard is because he has Flash. Usually creatures like this do have to have Flash, and Daring Wave Rider doesn't, which is not good, but I still think that it might have work to do in Standard on a number of different levels. Now, obviously, you know, this is 6 mana. That's so much, but you could reanimate it, and then it allows you to maybe even reanimate something else, depending on what reanimator spell you chose to reanimate it with. Stop saying reanimate, but either way, you know, once you do get it out of your yard, then it can recast something else out of your yard. So seems like pretty good value to me. But once it's on the table, then you can start blinking it and getting value that way. So just for those reasons, a card like this is always going to be something you want to look out for. And honestly, I could list off cards all day that this can recast to pretty good effect. But what I think I'm going to do is choose the top 5 that I would want to recast with this in current Standard. So let's get started with that. Number 5, Rankle's Prank. A lot of these are going to be 4 mana because I want to get maximum mana value out of this card. Only one of them is not 4 mana. Rankle's Prank this would be a fun one, and that's why it's at number 5. Number 4 is Another Round, which would be really cute. You can't like pay for X or anything if you recast this for free, but Another Round always blinks all of your dudes once at the very least. So not only could you blink all of your other people on the table, but you also get to blink Wave Rider and cast something else. Or maybe you want to reenact the crime. I guess this is number 3. What, did I lose count already? How did I do that? Yeah, the middle of the list. I guess you could reenact the crime, a deck that already uses reanimator tricks to recast certain spells out of its yard. So this could fit right into that deck. But number 2 is Ill-Timed Explosion, because there's always a chance that you just need another sweeper, or maybe you want a couple of cards and they're effectively free if you can cast the Daring Wave Rider and recast the Ill-Timed Explosion. Another cool thing about Ill-Timed Explosion is that, you know, you could always set it up to where it doesn't kill the otter itself, but it kills the like Brotherhood's End, everything else on the table. So I don't know, there's just some good options with that card, but what I want to recast the most is Beseech the Mirror. I don't know if this is like the best thing you can recast with the card in Standard, but it's the most tempting thing, you know, just go get any 4-drop from your deck and just throw it down. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Seemed good. So yeah, there are good targets for this card to recast in Standard. Is that going to mean that like the card definitely sees play? I don't know. 6 mana is ridiculous. I agree. But again, you always have to take cards like this at least pseudo seriously. So that's what I'm doing. Yes, even if it's a Surfing Otter, you have to take it seriously. Where are we? Number 8 is Husk Burster Swarm. Now, I'm pretty sure in the OTJ sleeper video, my number one sleeper was a guy that's kind of like this. So I'm trying to learn my lessons just a little bit, but I actually think that this is much, much better than most of the creatures that are like this, right? This isn't necessarily the best creature like this that's ever been printed. I won't go that far, but we're actually getting really, really close to it. I think the fact that it counts your creatures that are in exile is actually this massive deal that no one's really paying attention to. You know, usually you want to set this guy up with a bunch of mill strategies and put a bunch of dudes in your yard and he costs 1 or 2 mana to cast. But if your opponent exiles your graveyard, or if they sunfall you or something like that, then that's a lot of dudes in exile that don't contribute towards this guy anymore. But that's not a worry. That is no longer a worry. That seems really awesome that if they hit a sunfall and hit like 4 of your dudes, or again, which I think they're actually somewhat likely to do in this format, either exile your entire graveyard or basically all the creatures in your yard, 1 or 2 creatures at a time. Just not being nerfed by that action is actually a huge deal, man. I like this guy a lot, and it counts your dudes that are in exile because they're, you know, you cast their adventure half or whatever. It counts those guys. If you want to do something weird like demonic bargain and like exile the top 13 cards of your library or whatever that card's called, this works with that. If you want to somehow do weird like leveler tricks where you exile like the top half of your library, like this works with those too. So it just works in a way that a lot of creatures like this usually don't, and I love that. If, by the way, a lot of people comparing it to Gurmag Angler, I think it kind of works in a fun way with Gurmag Angler, right? Because if you have a bunch of dudes in your yard that allow you to like delve an angler out, and then because you now have a bunch of dudes in exile, you can still cast this guy for cheap too. That's sick, man. There's so many cool things about this guy, and I just want you to know he exists, but you do, so I should probably move on now. Number 7 is a season. Can you quickly guess which season it is? There's a cycle of these. There's one in each color, and some of them look better than the other ones. And now I think I've probably given you quite enough time to go down in the comments and actually guess which one you think it is. My number 7 is Season. Of the bold, it's the red one. This one kind of looks like the biggest joke out of all of them, which, you know, I like an underdog, but I don't think that I'm being like too biased towards bad cards here. You know how I am. I have that weakness some of the time, but this actually, what I read this is pay 5 mana, ramp 5. So like an Ironcrag Feat or even a Seething Song, if you want to put it that way. But, you know, Seething Song is like 1,000 times better than this. But I guess you could always Seething Song into this and make 5 treasures. Whatever, man. But red just hasn't really ramped effectively in a good long time. And this is better ramp than it seems. It can also draw you up to like 4 cards. That's pretty cool. It's got a mode on it to where like you can start killing stuff with it, and I guess you'll use that some of the time. But honestly, I just think like ramping a bunch, ramping 5 is potentially the best use case on the entire card, and I think it's the one that's like either people aren't seeing or they're not taking seriously enough. This card gives us the ability to play this on like turn 4 or something, and then play Atraxa on the next turn, or Omniscience on the next turn when that card comes out in Foundations, or Behold the Multiverse on the next turn. So the things that this card's actually setting up for you in Standard are, again, not unthinkable, so think about them. Be bold. Fortune does in fact favor it. But my number 6 is Cash Grab, probably the most begging to be commented on name in the entire set, considering who printed the card in the first place. But either way, this actually looks phenomenal to me, and I hear no one talking about it. Again, outside of talking about the name in like the most cynical ways you can, but Wizards has definitely earned those conversations. Either way, this is an instant speed, like a Grizzly Salvage effect, and I'm just always going to like those. And we just don't have a whole lot of them in Standard, to be honest, right? Anytime I see one of these, I kind of get a little bit pumped up. And there's a bunch of decks for this to go in right now, whether you're doing some sort of, you know, Aftermath Analyst 2.0 when we lose the new Capena lands, more on that later. You want to mill cards into your yard, right? This helps you do that. At instant speed, pretty good, but also helps out all the decks that want to forage, because forage is a new thing. Helps out threshold decks because threshold's back in Standard. Helps out all these kind of stick fingers decks, even though I think he rotates out of Standard, but you know what I mean. All these decks that want to put a ton of creature cards specifically into their yard, this helps with. Helps out the Squirming Emergence decks too. I think we lose Otherworldly Gaze. Am I wrong about that? Either way, just another piece that allows those kinds of decks. And I've already named like 4 or 5 of them that want cards in their yard to put those cards in their yard at a reasonable cost. And in this case, it also allows you to get back some card selection too. So just a phenomenal card that I want you to more or less ignore the squirrel text on. But if you can enable the squirrel text, like, good for you. That's pretty sweet. All right, man, that's fine. But like, even if you don't do that, just the fact that you mill forward instant speed and grab one of those cards is going to be good for a whole lot of decks. Now, number 5, we are halfway down the list. So let's look at a hero on a half shell. This is Fecund Green Shell over here. I love this dude, and most people are not talking about it, you know? I really feel like the world's gone topsy-turvy, because in the last couple of sets, I tried to talk about how that new Gitrog monster in Golgari was not going to be good. 5-mana creatures have to be phenomenal to see play in Standard. Everyone was telling me, Dev, you're crazy. That card is incredible. It's going to see so much play. Never saw any play whatsoever. I literally had people bookmarking the comment section of a couple of videos because I said that card was bad. And here we are, a couple of months later, and I'm trying to convince everybody else that a 5-drop is actually playable in Standard. Again, bizarro world, but when you actually look at the 5-drops that people do currently play in Standard, the list is woefully short, and I think this dude is of the power level to get on that list. Why am I doing the politician thumb? I'm doing this thing. This isn't a thing people actually do, but I just caught myself doing it without realizing. I'm still doing it. You have to confirm and deny things. It's how you become a good rhetorician. Sure, I think I nailed it there. But anyway, what I've already talked about a few times this season is all the turtles that this works with, and all. You can build a turtle deck if you want to do that, and just how it could be a good mid-range creature. But instead, I'm going to actually talk about all the 5-drops that people play in Standard, and I think I really only have to name 3 here truly, because there are some 5s that you occasionally see on Arena or whatever, but the only 5-drops that really see true play in Standard are Knight Errant of Eos, which doesn't count. I will contend that card does not count as a 5-drop, but you also see Aclazotz, which is the only true I see a lot of play in Standard 5-drop creature that we really have right now to compare this to. And I guess if you want to throw in Hidetsugu and Kairi, because like people are always doing weird meme tricks with it, and again, it's mostly an arena-specific card, but you see it a good bit. So I know you can name a couple of other 5-drops that are okay and see some play, Vorinclex and whatever, right? But for the most part, there's only one real 5-drop, Uncle Aclazotz, that sees actual Standard play. And I'm not sure this is quite on that level. You know, they go for the throat and it stays dead. So obviously Aclazotz has that edge over it. But at the same time, this is pretty decent in most scenarios. It runs up against Sheoldreds in a way that you probably don't like, but it also plays pretty well with Shelly. And there's also synergy because Shelly's name is Shelly. There's a joke there, and I will dig my way into it eventually. I don't know, dude. I actually think that this card has a real chance in Standard, and I will not be stopped in that assumption until 2 years from now when it's done nothing. And even then, I will be like, it's still got a year. So I don't know. If you're building mid-range in Standard, throw me a bone and try this card out. Number 4 is Storm Chaser's Talent. Now, I don't really have like an extended screed about this card or all the things that it works with or blah, blah, blah. Mostly what I want to talk about with this card is how the guy has prowess. The 1/1 that it gives you when you play the card, it has prowess. So it goes into your prowess deck as a 1-mana thing that gives you a body and also triggers prowess, which I love. I just all to every time we see cards like this, I kind of fall in love with them, you know. I'm always looking for, you know, cards that say a blue-red prowess deck can play that give you bodies without actually being creatures, you know, like they're non-creatures that trigger prowess, and that is extremely important. This does that, all for the cost of 1 mana, while also putting 2 permanents into play at the same time. A lot of cards can leverage that. Can we talk about Rottenmouth Viper again? Sure we can, but again, a lot of cards want multiple permanents to be in play for whatever reason. This also gives you a token, which can be tapped down to do numbers of numerous things. I think that's the words I'm looking for. Numerous things in the Standard environment. Tokens can be leveraged in tons and tons of ways, and this allows you to get one on the board for a single mana, but also later on in the game allows you to get back a removal spell, a lightning strike, a card draw spell, a sweeper if that's what you're looking for. The ability to pump mana into this and get something out of your yard is actually a lot better than a lot of the other classes in the set. Now my number 3 is actually a reprint, which I try to not do. I usually want to keep, you know, reprints off the sleepers list, but this time I just could not help myself. Not only because Colossification is just a card that I love. Okay, you got me. I'm going to love this card every time I see it. I'm this kind of Magic player at heart, whatever that means, and I think that it's mostly bad, but, you know, it's a matter of perspective, I guess. I will keep this kind of innocence in my heart, and I will not be sullied, and you can't do anything about it, and I am stronger for it. But I actually have a real reason that this card is on the list, and not just like, come on, guys. Either way, I think that there's a combo in Standard right now that goes along with Colossification that wins the game on the spot and does not care if all of the combo pieces are in your yard, right? So let's take a look at this. I've been looking for a thing to do with One Last Job for a couple of months, ever since OTJ came out. I've been kind of a fan of this card. And what this can do is, let's say there's a Colossification in your graveyard. Well, you can just pay 4 mana. That's not much. You could actually do it on curve with the thing I'm about to tell you. But either way, yeah, you pay 4 mana and you get the Colossification out of your yard and you put it on a Voldaran Thrillseeker. I'm imploring you to see what I'm doing here. You probably do. A child, a baby, a 3-year-old. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, here we go. So this is a real combo you can do in Standard right now on turn 4 of a game of Magic, and I think you have to have an extra mana to effectively win the game off of it, but who's counting? You probably are, but I'm not, because I want to live in Christmas land. But I guess if you want to get a little bit more hard-nosed and spiky about it, you could again point out that even if Voldaran Thrillseeker is already in your graveyard for whatever reason, well, then you just pay, what is it, a total of 6 mana and get, is that correct? You pay 6 mana, I hope I'm right, and you get both the Thrillseeker and the Colossification out of your yard at the same time. And obviously, once it's strapped to the Thrillseeker, it just kills your opponent when you sacrifice it. But, you know, we've got like Cacophony Scamp in Standard too, if you want to do that. We've got other fling effects in Standard as well, so you know, Thrillseeker's not the only way to get it done, is all I'm saying. So, you know, there's lots of ways to actually throw a 20 plus at your opponent right now because this card exists. And I want to really examine all the ways because I think that one of them might actually be kind of viable. But also, just before I get off this card, I will repeat myself this time. I just love stuff like this, and you will not break my soul. Do you hear me? You will not. Number 2 is Lumra, Bellow of the Wilds. No one's talking about it. No one's talking about it, and I think I understand why. I think it's because this card was actually previewed months before official previews started as like one of the first look cards, and everyone kind of forgot about it in the interim, you know? Everyone just kind of forgets this card's in the set whatsoever, but it's actually, I think, going to be a somewhat important card in the upcoming Standard. Just like Daring Wave Rider, I am completely aware this card costs 6 freaking mana if you want to throw in if you want to be a potty mouth. This card costs so much mana to actually get on the table, but I think that certain decks just aren't going to care because they can reanimate it or they can just ramp into it really easily. Specifically that latter deck, you know, like everyone's talking, again, I have to bring these lands up. Everyone's talking about how the new Capenna lands rotate, and thus World Soul's Rage, Aftermath Analyst, that whole shtick that you've gotten used to over the last few months is no longer going to be a deck. But first I want to point out that Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse are legal in Standard. There is a strictly better version of both of them that came out in Murders of Karlov Manor that is legal to play in Standard. Fabled Passage will be legal to play in Standard because of this set. And there's a bunch of other sacrificable lands in Standard and stuff. So it shouldn't be too hard to put lands into your yard, and stuff like Cash Grab that we've already looked at in this video will help you do that. Analyst itself will help you do that. So it shouldn't be hard to actually put a decent number of lands into your yard relatively early, and even ramp again with that same basic shell of like the 3 mana Nissa from March of Machine Aftermath, right? So you can get the Lumberer really quick, and just that enter the battlefield trigger, she'll be able to bring back a ton of lands, right? So I love that, but we also get like Iridescent Vine Lasher in this upcoming Standard, maybe my favorite card in the entire set and all that. I've talked about it enough, but if you are able to bring back a bunch of lands, and some of them maybe are those new like deserts, the duels that come into play and sting your opponent for a damage. So if you have a Vine Lasher or 2, because you're able to offspring it, and then you lumber in a bunch of these like desert lands, you really don't have to have that many of them to just kill your opponent outright, even if they're at their starting life total, and they probably won't be. Aside from that, Lumber's just a huge creature. Like once you do get her in play, she's enormous. That's a massive lady. So like, I think that Lumber might actually be not only one of those new enablers for these like lands matter decks, but also effectively a win condition for them. This is a good Magic card. Don't forget about it. But here we are, number 1, everybody. What could it possibly be? It is a rare. I'm going to give you that. It is gold. I'm going to give you that. You now have 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. My number 1 is Dreamdo Entrancer. This unassuming little guy is a card that most people, if they talk about it at all, are saying it'll be really, really decent in draft. I think that this is actually subtly one of the better mid-range 4-drops in all of Standard the moment it drops. Now, first of all, the blink ability on this guy is through the roof. Imagine how well this guy's going to work with like a Salvation Swan or something like that in both ways, you know, like you can play Salvation Swan to blink the Dreamdo Entrancer. It is so hard for me to say the name of this card. So let me just say the frog. You can play your bird to blink your frog, and then he'll tap something else down and gain flying, which is really sweet. Or you can play your bird, and let's say you use the frog to tap down one of your own guys and draw a couple of cards. Well, now you can use the bird to reset the guy you tap down, and he no longer has stun counters. That's a pretty sweet application right there. But altogether, these two cards just work together like so well, and now you have a flying 3/4 if you do choose to blink it. But aside from that, Parting Gust, another really sweet new blink thing that we got in this standard. You can either use Parting Gust to exile one of their dudes and give them a fish if that's what you want to do, or you can use Parting Gust to exile, like to blink your own frog, right? And draw a couple of cards by tapping down one of your dudes when he comes into play. Or just blink your frog during their attack step with your Parting Gust, and suddenly your frog can block, and that guy is, you know, removed from combat or whatever, like all of this, or just exiled forever. And so just really sweet interactions with a couple of the already extremely strong blink cards that we know are coming in Bloomburrow. But this works well with already extant, you know, blink spells and bounce spells too. You bounce himself back to your hand and all that. So I just love the way that this dude looks. I also like the way that he works with a bunch of other kind of mid-rangey options that we have in Standard right now. Is it better than Urtai? Probably not. Is it better than Sheldred? Probably not. Is it better, in fact, than Salvation Swan? Probably not, but I do still like the way this works with a ton of things right now. Like in a Bant deck with Swan, you could always play Helga on, say, turn 3, and this really works with Helga. That could go in a frog deck, by the way, because they're both frogs, but this just works really well with Helga because it draws you a card, puts counter on the Helga, and all that stuff. So, again, whether it's in frogs or just a basic sort of mid-range deck, I think this has tons and tons of work it could potentially do, and Simic just doesn't get effectively removal creatures like this very often, especially on respectable bodies like this guy has like multiple modes on it. You know, if you don't need it to be a removal creature, it's not. It's a draw a bunch of cards creature, which is pretty sweet too. You don't see a cross between a Mold Drifter and a Shriek Moth super often, so you should probably point it out when you do. And I know I'm being a little hyperbolic when I say that, but not that hyperbolic. Removal or card draw is a ridiculous option to have on a 4-mana 3/4. There's a respectable body that's going to do some real work, and I expect it to show up. So how do you feel now? Does that riveting commentary make you want to play the card, or do you still think that if you try to cast this in Standard, you're probably going to croak? I don't know. I want to know your opinions because some weird sleepers this time around, but I hope that I advocated for them in a way that makes you think about them in more ways than you were currently thinking about them. You know, you don't have to agree with all of these, but hopefully I opened you up in a couple of cases to be like, oh yeah, the card does do that. Either way, you know, even if you didn't, I want to hear your opinions down there. Just let me know how you felt about all these and what your sleepers are for this set. Aside from that, just stay tuned to the channel because our top 50 cards, I have to do a top 50. Turns out I listed all the cards that I think could make a top 50 the other night, and I think that it actually reached almost 75 cards. So that's a lot. It's so many cards. So top 50 coming up very soon, and then we're going to get together with our buddy Power Dragon and talk about all the most overrated cards in the set. Kind of the opposite of this video. So be with us for all of that stuff. Subscribe to the sandwich. Steven, did you not subscribe? Go ahead and do it, buddy. But either way, that's all I got for this one. So just get at me in the comments section. Do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Like the video if you haven't done it yet. Let's get this one to 10,000 likes. It's impossible. Prove me wrong. But also you can check out the Patreon if you want. We have a Patreon. It's just $1 a month to like vote on what decks we do first when Bloomburrow Standard actually comes around, which won't be too much longer. Affect the course of YouTube history and pick what decks we do for Bloomburrow Standard. Just $1 a month to do that. Am I worth $1 a month? Am I worth $1 a month? I think so. Anyway, link in the description for that stuff. Links in the description to prior videos that we've done and the Twitch channel if you want to follow on that. The description is a hotbed of activity. Get down there. But anyway, I'm basically done talking at this point. I love you. Go back to your business. Do what you were doing. Are you at work right now? Are you at work watching this video right now? Get back. Come on, man. watch another video. If you want to keep talking Magic with me again, I'll leave links in the description. But that's about all I got for now. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.